Hi, I'm Dave with ELECTRIMOTION, and today we're going to do a little bit of a video on the sboo1a safety box kit and the RF001 track location shutdown kit and how they tie together and how they go on a car. Total cost for this whole kit is about $800 total, and we're going to go through everything from start to finish on it. Okay, we are going to cover everything that comes in the kit. Obviously you have instructions. We have the sboo1a, the actual control box. We have a tether kit for the blown application that goes on the manifold across the burst panels. We have a tether cord which goes between the box to the kit. It's different lengths. 10 foot for a dragster is standard and 6 foot for funny car is standard. We have the air valves that are used to deploy the chutes via an air cylinder, and also to shut the fuel off with an air cylinder. We have switches here. This one is a driver activated switch for a dragster, and this one is a fire bottle switch for funny car. Then in the RF kit, it's a lot simpler. We just have the RF receiver, the instructions. This gets mounted on the back of the car. And this is the cord that goes between this box and the safety box. There are a few optional parts that you can get along with the safety box, depending on your application, to perform functions. One of them are these 3-inch air cylinders. They can be used to deploy the parachutes or shut the fuel system off. They're air operated. These control valves supply the air, but you can mount them on the car, run them to a lever for the parachutes or the fuel, and when the air deploys, it can either pull or push the lever to shut the fuel off. The other optional part is you can add a pressure switch, which ties into these switches. The pressure switch can either be pan pressure, which we normally set at 15 pounds per square inch, or you can use it as an overboost in case of intake push rod failure or something like that. It will shut the car off if you have too much blower boost pressure. So this is a blower boost or pan pressure switch. They're just different pressure. Boost pressures are normally around 60 pounds. Okay, as far as placement on the car, the main thing we'll talk about, or the first thing we'll talk about, is the box itself. On a dragster, most people mount them on a plate above the driver's legs. A lot of the other electronics are already there on the car, and you already have 12 volts accessible. So this in a dragster is normally on the plate above the driver's legs. In a funny car, most people mount them in a little management box up at the front of the car. It's mounted with 2 screws, very simple. Normally, the control air valves, they plug into this harness, so they get mounted rather close to this box. In a dragster, you have the driver operated safety or shut-off switch. It's a momentary toggle that deploys the system. That has to be mounted where the driver can reach it, normally on the steering bar right next to the steering wheel. On a funny car, we have the fire bottle switch. Most fire extinguisher systems have this 8 pipe port right in the bottle. You can screw that right into the bottle. This wire, if you're using the fire bottle switch, the wire will come right down out of the management box right to the fire bottle, and that connects there. Tether kit, all bolts on the manifold across the burst panels. The only thing really left to mount on the car is the RF shutdown antenna. It's to be mounted on the rear of the car, funny car or dragster, all the way to the back of the car. Most people mount it either antenna down or antenna up. It works best that way, and it is not really made to be mounted on its side with the antenna facing parallel to the ground. It's really made to be perpendicular to the ground. A lot of people mount them right on the rear end of a dragster or on the rear tree of a funny car. Okay, now we're going to talk about how everything is plugged in together. I've got it all plugged together on the table, and we're going to talk about the different inputs, and when the inputs are activated, what outputs are going to shut down the car. This is the safety box. There are two sides to the safety box. These are all inputs, and these are all outputs. And then the center connector goes and connects to the RF unit in the back of the car. So as far as inputs, we have switched power, turns on when you turn the car on, turns off when you turn it off. We have the driver activated switch, or in a funny car's case, we have a fire bottle pressure switch. And we have, in the blown alcohol application, we have the tether input. As far as the output side of the box, we have power out, which is used to supply low current power to the ignition. We remove power from the ignition to shut the car off in the event of the system is set off. We have the air shuttle valve or air solenoids that run the air cylinders to shut the fuel off and do the chutes. And then we have this blue connector. This is an analog output. You can connect it to any data logger such as a race pack or an RPM computer. It gives you a 0 to 5 volt signal, tells you the status of the safety box, and will give you live data going down the racetrack if it is to set off. Okay, inputs. We have the power input we talked about. The driver switch, or in the funny car case, the fire bottle switch. If the wires are connected together via switch closure, it sets the box off. When it comes to the tether cord input, it has a completed circuit. If the burst panel was to burst, it unplugs the tether at the manifold, and in doing that, it opens the circuit and sets the box off. The RF system, if it sees the signal from the track locating transmitter, which is past the finish line, it sends a signal to the box and sets the box off. So if the box is set off, it's going to be one of the three inputs that cause it. As far as outputs, if the box is set off, it removes power from the ignition, which shuts the car ignition off, and it also energizes the solenoids, which the air from the solenoids can run the cylinders to shut the fuel off and to deploy the chutes. So we have inputs, outputs, and the RF input. Okay, we're going to talk about a few troubleshooting things to look for. A lot of people go to the racetrack, the system deploys, they don't know what has caused it. Can't stress enough monitoring this with data logger, because it will tell you which input set the system off and when. If you do not monitor this, you got to look at everything or change everything. So monitoring it really helps when it comes to troubleshooting the system, because it'll tell you exactly which device set the device off and what and when. Common problems on the RF system. We see a lot of cords pinched, motor plate, body work on the car, funny car getting up around the go around to the body. If you pinch this wire and short it out, it's probably going to shut your car off. It's going to set the system off and everything will deploy. One thing to know, if any of the inputs go off, it sends all the outputs, turns the ignition off, puts the chutes out, and the fuel off. They all happen. Not much to go wrong with the fire bottle switch and the driver switch. We have seen people pinch this wire somewhere along the way, or metal touches a screw, grounds out the wire, sets it off. Fire bottle switch, if you do have a fire and you set your fire bottle off, it's a good idea to change out the switch because fire extinguisher compound is corrosive and it can corrode the switch, and then you have problems. The next time you need it, it may not work. So you need to service this stuff on a regular basis. The tether cord, its completed circuit keeps the system alive. When the circuit is opened or broken and then unplugged, that's what sets the system off. So as good maintenance, you want to keep these connectors clean. You want to make sure the pins are tight and nice and replace them periodically, especially if they get used where the panels come out. You want to replace all that stuff because a bad connection here will set the system off. So those devices will all turn it off, or will all set it off and stop your car. So if you have trouble, look at all three paths and try to find pinched wire, broken wires, bad connectors. Okay, I want to take a minute and talk about the track location, the RF shutdown device that's mounted on the back of the car. This seems to be something that a lot of people don't understand or don't realize. So I just kind of want to explain this system a lot. This is a high frequency system. We mount them on the back of the receiver on the back of the car. It's a very line of sight type system, so you don't want to bury it down in the car. It may not go off when it needs to. One thing, we have a lot of people question whether it can go off on the starting line. The transmitters are very low power. They'll only reach about 100 feet. So it is not possible for your RF system to see a signal at the starting line. The transmitters are clear down past 1,400 feet, so it's very much impossible to travel the distance all the way up the track and make it go off early. The other thing that a lot of people, they think that somebody could just throw out a bunch of frequencies with radios or something in the stands and set off cars. Obviously, we couldn't have that happen. So this is an encoded system. Not only does it have to be on the exact frequency and channel as the receiver set for, but there's a data package, we call it like an address, very similar to your cell phone and a phone number. All phones are basically on the same frequency, they just have different addresses that makes your phone ring instead of somebody else's. So we've used the same similar technology where not only does it have to see the right frequency and channel, it has to have the correct address a number of times before we deem it a real signal to shut the car off. So it's very unlikely that it's going to go off when it's not supposed to because of the RF signal. Okay, the last thing we're going to cover here is parts that the racers should carry in their trailer. I would recommend buying a complete system. It's not that much money, like I said, $800, and then you'll have every part. If you do have trouble, you can change every part. If you cannot afford to have every part, you would for sure want to have the tether kit. That's everything that bolts on the manifold, so if you were to knock the burst panels out of it, you could replace them. Tether kits aren't that expensive, and that's probably the first thing you would have. Secondly, you would have the tether cord, which is the cord from the manifold up to the control box. Those would be the most likely to need. Air valves, pretty reliable. Every once in a while we get dirt, trash, or Teflon tape, because if people use Teflon tape on fittings, that gets in the valve and they'll start to leak. They're very easily taken apart and cleaned, probably cover that in another video, but it doesn't hurt to have a set of air valves because you don't need air leaking on your car and cost you a run that way. We talked about the fire bottle switch, pretty small, inexpensive part. You would probably want to carry one of those. Even if you didn't set off the fire bottle, something could hit it, break it, and you would probably want to have that laying around. The RF unit in the back, about the only trouble we see with that is sometimes parachute cables or something, maybe tying down the car strap, something catches it and breaks the antenna off. We can fix them, but if you're at a race, obviously you can't run without it, so wouldn't hurt to have a spare of that. The boxes itself are pretty reliable. They've been out since 2008, same design. You never know, if you short out an output or pinch a cable, it could hurt it. So maybe you wouldn't have to have it as a spare. Like I said, I recommend having the whole kit as a spare. But the little things are really probably what you need.